Welcome to the Pop Cult Podcast. Here are your hosts, Ariana and Seth.
This is the Pop Cult Podcast. I'm Seth.
I'm Ariana.
And today we're going to be talking about two very different films in terms of budget, length, subject matter.
Yep.
They're both American films.
Yes.
One film, which we'll be talking about a little later, Happer's Comet, comes in at just a little over an hour long. And the film we're going to be talking about first is nearly 3 hours long.
Oof.
Yeah, and you feel it. So the first one we're going to talk about is Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, released this year, a continuation of the contemporary Planet of the Apes franchise that started with, I want to say, Rise of the Planet of the Apes. I don't know anymore. I don't really care. So many years after the reign of Caesar, a young ape goes on a journey that will lead him to question everything he's been taught about the past and make choices that will define a future for apes and human alike. Okay, name any of the characters in this movie.
Noah.
Okay, that's the main.
May. Sona? I think that's it. That's all I can remember.
So Noah is correct. May, that's the human character.
Yeah.
Suna, not Sona.
Suna.
You don't remember Raka? You don't remember Anaya? You don't remember I mean, I remember William H. Macy. I didn't remember his name, but because he's a human in the movie. Do you remember Dar? You don't remember Silva? How could you not remember all these like wonderfully painted characters with such complex motivations and backgrounds? You know, a 3-hour movie. You got the time. Think about the one Lord of the Rings movie and how much you could walk away saying from memory about those movies.
Yeah, but I think it also just has to do with the fact that, like, it just lacked a certain charm about it.
But that's the thing is, a Lord of the Rings movie is made by someone who loves this.
Yeah.
And they are making sure that that love is coming across on screen. I could say the same thing even about some Star Wars movies. Like you think about The Last Jedi. That's being made by someone who genuinely loves Star Wars. They want to do something different with it, but they genuinely love this thing. First of all, the portion of people in the world that are Planet of the Apes fans is a very small number. I can only name one Planet of the Apes fan that I know of, Dana Gould. That's about it. It's
like he has a whole entire show.
But that's like the 60s one. I have a feeling he probably like is fine with these, but he's still one of these like boomer nerds.
Yeah, that's like attached to his childhood because his childhood was best.
I don't think in 20 years, let's say, you're gonna have people that are as rabidly fans of this as you did with the original Planet of the Apes. You think from like 68 was when the first Apes movie came out. So in 1988, I guarantee you there were more hardcore Planet of the Apes fans than there are now.
I think it's just weird because I feel like, all right, so Caesar, who was in the other movies.
Oh, Caesar.
Caesar.
We see Caesar.
I don't know. It just came out that way. He was like an interesting character to follow.
And that was he was Gollum. I can't remember. Andy Serkis.
Yes.
Yeah.
So even though like there's a lot of the film that you're just like, it was always promising, I think the ending execution just always let me down.
Of those first, or you haven't seen the very first one?
I haven't seen the first one.
I think that's probably the best one, but even then, these are not fantastic movies. They're okay. No. They're like, if you come across them on TV, you might watch from where you catch it, but I don't think many people are seeking these movies out, right?
Like, I was very confused because, like, I think TikTok was referencing another film that had to do with the Planet of the Apes. It was like, it's always like that one same character going like, oh no. Oh no, that
was the last one with Woody Harrelson. That was the Steve Zahn.
Yeah. And at first I was just like very confused when I saw this one. I'm just like, because so many people I heard were like, oh, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes came out. I'm gonna go watch the original ones.
Like original what?
like Planet of the Apes films, like the first,
68?
like the 68 ones,
okay.
and go through the rest of them. I think I had like 2 or 3 friends that decided to do that.
Yeah.
I don't know why after watching this film.
Well,
It
like
was-
the first Planet of the Apes, I think, is a good movie because
Mhm.
it wasn't written with the idea of it being the first in a series of movies. It was co-written by Rod Serling of
Mhm.
Twilight Zone. And you can see it's based on a novel by Pierre Boulle, which I've heard is very different than any adaptation.
Okay.
And I really want to read that at some point. Because it's a very it's short sci-fi novella, but very different version of the Planet of the Apes. So the 60s Hollywood version being co-written by Rod Serling, you think about the ending of that movie, it's clearly supposed to be a story about humanity's seeming willingness to want to destroy and annihilate itself.
Yeah.
And that's what made that first movie so memorable. And the problem with that first movie is they immediately tried to franchise it because of how popular it was. It was a pre-Star Wars kind of franchising.
Mhm.
And I just don't think the story has that much. It doesn't have the legs for this, right? Like it's a one-off allegory, and it works great that way. And this constant effort to try to bring it back, especially this version, to me, is a perfect example of Hollywood films as pure IP content generation being handled by finance bros.
Yeah, I think it's just a lot of times what happens with the remakes is there's, like I said, there's something that's interesting in it, and midway you think this might be a good movie, only for half of the end to just kind of fall apart. And I feel like that with every
when you
remake.
make a 3-hour movie that's predicated on such a thin thing, it's going to fall apart. Here's another thought I had while we watched this movie. Doesn't this feel like the first season of a streaming series that's been condensed into a 3-hour movie?
Yeah, it felt like, Apple Plus made a pass and they scrambled about and decided to make this into a film, because it feels more like an Apple Plus
Like Silo.
Silo
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Because here's what I would set it as. The first episode is just Noah and establishing his bird tribe, right?
Yeah.
And you hint at he maybe finds the stuff that hints at May's existence, right? The second episode is the attack on the community, and that establishes who the threat is, right? And that's our first 2 hours of the show. It gives the side characters enough room to actually have personalities other than just the role they will have in the plot as related to Noah.
Yeah.
Where it feels like, oh, these are individual people and characters. And then that also, if you do it in TV series format, you could do a spotlight episode on a few of these characters, or flashback episodes that kind of show, oh, when did the falconry thing start? Like, and what spiritual purpose does that serve beyond just kind of the very rough sketch that we get here? Or once you find out who May is, you have a flashback episode for her or something. Because the end of the movie feels like a season finale cliffhanger.
Yeah, it does.
It does not feel like the end of a movie. It feels like a Lost season finale.
Yeah, like
I was expecting to hear that Michael
audience.
Giacchino music, that like it felt like that was going to be happening. So there's several actors of note, several actors I feel like maybe I've seen their names, but I don't fucking know anything about them. Speaking of Lost, we have Kevin Durand, who I can never remember the character's name, Kimi, who murders, spoiler if you haven't watched Lost. If you haven't watched Lost at this point, I don't really know. Kimi, who murders Alex. Ben, yeah. Is the voice and I guess the physical performer of Proximus Caesar, who is the ape who has positioned himself as the heir to Caesar's throne, kind of, or legacy. What did you think of Kevin Durand's performance? Because I'd say it's the biggest performance out of all the ones in the movie.
Yeah, like he did it was a good performance. I think, so we're going to go through like character by character.
I'm going to talk about a few. So we're just going to focus on Proximus.
Good. did a good job. It wasn't that amazing, but he was the villain that as a little kid you'd probably be afraid of.
And it did feel that there were like little gestures and things with his mouth that he really thinking about the performance.
Yeah, I saw like little tidbits of interviews. I think we were watching like maybe through TikTok at some point where he talked about really getting into the idea of playing
an ape.
And
it
how
seems like he
was,
did, yeah.
Like that he watched a lot of like ape movements and apparently spoke to one of the other actors called Corinne, who has studied apes very closely. Because he wanted to make sure that the body movement was exact.
So he's our antagonist. Let's switch to our protagonist, Owen Teague as Noah. How'd you feel about that performance?
I just Noah felt like it was a weird main character to fall. Like on paper, he makes sense.
Well, he's the
son of the chief.
Yeah, it's a very stereotypical main character.
Yeah,
which is what made it so fucking boring.
And it's just like he just wants to make his father proud, and his father is kind of like, I don't know, seems to treat his bird as if it was his first child because the bird keeps attacking him. He's just meh, very bland.
Well, it's one of those things where I see a picture of this guy and I think he's like 30 other different actors because he's just so generic looking. So that's one thing. But then his acting is just generic. It feels like someone out of the sort of Disney acting machine.
CW.
Yeah.
Like,
just are you attractive enough that middle America will look at you for more than an hour?
But
right, you're in a movie. There we go.
The funny thing is, like, his face isn't even on screen. He's supposed to be mimicking what's supposed to be an ape. He's more like.
Do you notice that he's also a light-skinned ape? That there is different tones. I noticed to ape the chimpanzees, which is in real life. That's the way it is. But our main character, of course, has to be a light-skinned chimp, even though he has a friend who's dark-skinned.
Yeah.
We would never make the dark-skinned chip the hero, which tells you how insane racism is in Hollywood, that in a movie about chimpanzees, there's colorism.
Yep.
Right? Like, that's insane. And then May, I guess, is kind of the co-protagonist in a way with Noah. What did you think of Freya Allen?
Boring.
Yeah, it's like
so fucking boring.
Dollar store Anya Taylor-Joy.
Yeah, and I think it's one where
she's got her eyes are too far apart. She's got that like alien face that Anya Taylor-Joy has, but then she has no charisma.
Yeah, and it's this weird thing that so she can talk, and I almost wish that her talking ability was like less of a quality versus the apes.
Well, but the thing is, as soon as I started to get a sense of this character and how she seemed to know what was going on, I made my prediction. I'll say my prediction was wrong, but it was not far off. Okay. Where I was like, oh, this is like a reverse thing where we're seeing the original movie from the point of view of the apes, and she's an astronaut from some ship that's crashed, right?
Yeah.
That's the first thing I thought. Because her knowledge of things, of like what was behind the armored doors, I was like, oh, she was like in the military and she was part of some space operation. And what they're doing is they're like remaking the original Planet of the Apes from a different point of view.
Yeah, I think I had a little bit of like, I had problems with that afterwards because it's just this weird thing of it being so Noah's tribe is taken and she happens to have May had caused problems for him beforehand. And because she's there, that's the reason why they invade the tribe, because it's because echoes are around. But
then it's kind of revealed later that Proximus regularly enslaves other apes to help him in this effort to break this door open.
Yeah.
And by claiming to be the heir to Caesar, that's how he's like, no, see, I'm like Caesar and you all love Caesar, so you love me.
Yeah, and it's supposed to be, well, we were protecting you from the echoes, fuck that shit kind of attitude. It for May to suddenly become the co-leader of this group was very confusing for me because it's not as if like
they never seemed to feel shocked that she could speak as well as she did.
Yeah, and
they were just like, oh, she can talk, and you're like, okay.
trusting her immediately the way that they do.
Well, but then they wouldn't be able to have Proximus go on his little speech about you can't trust human. Human cannot be trusted. You're a fool, Noah. And then we go like, can he trust her? And then there's the moment where she does kind of betray him in the big like third act, right?
Which was what when
The explosive, right?
Yeah.
And so, and then the way it, especially because the way it ends, you're like, oh, okay, I see exactly where another movie in this would go, right?
Yeah.
So it's, are they going to be enemies? But then I know that a second movie, because this is all very formulaic and it's going to follow very tried and true, focus grouped plot tropes. Here's what would happen. You know what happened?
What?
There'd be an even worse third enemy group that would force the humans and Noah's people to have to work together. So by the end of that movie, either they defeat this third group or they're in that they'll find their alliance by the end of the second movie, right? And then that means the third movie, it's the humans and Noah's tribe versus this third party. It could be if they want to rip off old Planet of the Apes movies, go to Beneath the Planet of the Apes, the second movie in the series, where it turns out there's these like crazy human mutants that live beneath the surface of the earth and they worship an atomic bomb. And like Charlton Heston is trying to stop them from setting it off, which gets him re-involved with the apes from the previous movie. And like and that's what they'll do, right? Like that's what they're going to do. And it's not something I need to wait to see. It's something that I know they'll do because it takes, if I was able to think of it, of course they thought of it, right? Like they just look at their IP and they kind of harvest the carcass for parts and then go, what if we put this here and we put that there? Ah, see, we've recontextualized it without really doing anything.
It's like the betrayal felt so fucking stupid at the end because again, I think we don't really care about spoilers about this film as of right now. It can't be
spoiled. If you've ever seen a movie, a Hollywood movie made in like the last 10 years, you're going to sit there and go like, oh, and then this is going to happen, and then this is going to happen.
He pulls out a gun to like prevent Noah from basically getting killed. And then Noah's supposed to be surprised when like after Caesar's like, oh, hey, May, you can leave. It's
Proximus,
cool.
not
Proximus Caesar. It's like, you can leave. It's cool. My question is there more of those in there? And she goes, oh, fuck no, I'm not going to let him have it. Explosion happens. I feel like that shouldn't have been a sense of betrayal if I was just like, yeah, like, no, he shouldn't have the guns. He almost fucking beat you fucking to death to begin with. So the guns are bad. But it's just supposed to be like, oh no, but all these other apes died because of like the drowning. I'm like, well, it's very confusing because it seemed like he got all his tribe out.
It did seem like, yeah, they saved most of them. And then the whole bird thing showdown with Proximus, once again, another thing that if you've seen a movie in the last decade from Hollywood, in the first act, when Noah is struggling to call his father's falcon to him, you know, by the third act, it's Chekhov's falcon, right? Like the falcon will play a crucial point in like wrapping this up. And that's why I find these movies so goddamn boring, is because they're not trying anything different and they're coasting on spectacle. They're not actually delivering an interesting story in this very different world or making any sort of comment, which is what good science fiction does, is comment on now by using these sort of fantastical things. But the one thing, I've seen multiple reviews of this movie where people are saying things, people are happily settling for slop. They're just going like, oh, but I see people reveling in the spectacle and saying, who cares about the plot? Literally, I saw that. And one of the things I felt while we were watching it at a certain point was, this feels like cutscenes from a video game. And that removes the only fun part of that experience, which would be playing the game.
Yeah, it was, at the end, it was just boring, even though like I technically like, I love when world building is happening, right?
The first hour of this movie, just nothing but world building.
Yeah.
Barely conflict at all.
And you're just like, if you're a person who just likes to see it, that is a cool thing to see. But then afterwards, when the world building is done,
it doesn't really amount to anything.
It doesn't amount to anything. It's not as if like, you know, while Noah is looking for his tribe, that the birds become an important thing to find the tribes. At the beginning, you're like, oh yeah, maybe he's following the birds, but he finds his orangutan, and the orangutan is like, you remember Caesar? Let me explain
And
to
he's
you.
like part of sort of a religious order that follows the teachings of Caesar, and they're
Yeah.
supposed to be like, no, they understand what Caesar was about.
And he's like, let me explain what Caesar is to you before you go into this guy's place. Oh, look, an echo's following us. Call
Well,
her
you keep saying echo.
Yeah.
Echoes are what they're referring to as humans. Yeah.
And then it's just like, we'll call her Nova. And then when they encounter danger, that's when she finally speaks.
Well, then he goes, why do we call them Novas? Because that's what Caesar called. He goes like, I don't know. That's this whole movie. Why is this happening? I don't know, because the plot says it has to. And one of the things, people who keep talking about how great the spectacle of it is, I found the special effects in this movie to vary wildly in quality. There were moments of absolute brilliance where it was like perfection, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's moments that look so fucking ugly, and it's like maybe it didn't get rendered correctly, or the contrast between the CG character and the CG background is so pronounced that any sense of realism is just erased from the screen. And you realize, like, oh, these are a bunch of people in motion capture suits standing in a warehouse that's just been painted green. And there's nothing here that's actually tangible or has any weight to it. It's just, this might as well be like a DreamWorks animation movie at this point. It's a movie that I've also seen this question being asked. And this is a question that when I really thought about it, the answer, you're like, yeah, I don't think it needs to be. Why are the main characters all apes? If they were humans, would it change anything about the plot?
No.
It wouldn't.
No.
There's nothing about them being apes that makes a difference.
It's just the continuation
It's factions.
of what's supposed to be like with the whole Caesar thing.
It could be about people who are vault dwellers and people who remained on the surface.
Well, that's
right. Like it doesn't. There's no difference.
I was joking on how I would rather watch a horror film with a bunch of people as apes. You don't tell me why. You're just sort of like, it's supposed to be like, oh no, this is, and the promotion would be like, hey guys, we found a film from an alternative universe. This is how they would do horror if like everybody was apes. Then I'd probably be like, sold, I'll watch it.
Because you think about, these could be Na'vi from Avatar. These could be any generic group of people in any movie. There's nothing specifically about the apes here that plays any significant role in the movie.
Well, it's the same with like the humans when like May is having an argument with like William H. Macy at some point, and she's like, "But it was the humans," and he's like, "Yeah, but apes are here now, so what are we fucking supposed to do about that? We just live in the world that we are." And she's like, "But the humans," and you're like, "Okay,
I'm like, but who gives a shit?
When the fuck did she get this knowledge, or who raised her to be that way?"
Well, at the end, we find out, right? Like that is revealed.
It's revealed, but I felt like it.
Well, that's why in the second movie you'll learn more. You'll learn more in the second season of Planet of the Apes, the TV show, which I think would just be a better route to go. I mean, if they're going to make a Lord of the Rings show and a Dune show and they're making a Penguin show based off the Batman movie, just make a Planet of the Apes show. It would probably end up being a better thing than making these movies.
Like majority of those shows, I'm never excited to watch.
No, I'm not watching
until I hear like maybe critics being like, "Oh, this is good."
Well, I mean, we watched that Lord of the Rings show and it fucking sucked. It was awful.
It was really bad because they didn't have the full rights. Because they didn't have the full rights, they had to just be like, "Let's go deeper into the lore. Let's make up this character to substitute for this character."
Like, hey guys, you ever hear of the Silmarillion? And so. Yeah, and you think in this age of streaming series, this would be like a perfect thing to do, right? Put it on Peacock. I think, did Universal make this movie? I don't know who made it. A 20th Century Studio, Disney. So Disney owns this.
Yeah, but they're too busy making how many fucking versions of Star Wars into different shows.
Well, they're doing a new Alien movie. There's an Alien TV series apparently coming to FX called Alien: Earth.
Like I want to know, for people who are fans of this, are they really excited for this, or are we just being bombarded with different franchises until something sticks? Because now the superhero genre is like on the low.
Well, it's basically we're now in IP world because Mario and
Yeah.
Barbie did really well. It's no longer just superheroes, it's like just nostalgia bait. It's, oh, you remember that? Well, there's a new one.
And this has been going on for like, I feel like all of my 20s
But
and
I think
30s.
the amount of money and financing that's being sunk into it, that's the problem for me. I'm like, okay, you want to make another Planet of the Apes movie, whatever. But when like you're making these movies and the goal is that you have to make like $1 billion worldwide to make back what you spent, is we've kind of lost the plot at that point where it's like, yeah, I mean, I know there's supposed to be movies that are for escapism, right? And all and spectacle. But this is like fucking insane when you're spending more than the GDP of some countries to make a fucking movie that isn't that good.
And the thing is, like, there's no political like comment anyways, because because they can't, because they won't allow it, because now it's just like,
Well, because then
no,
you
we
might
can't touch it.
you might upset the Trump supporters, and we really that's one scary thing I'm realizing about our world is the way you're seeing the media kind of just resign itself to the idea of that ideology coming to power, which is easy when the diet version of it already is in power. Uh, that you're gonna have such toothless content, and it's not art. There's nothing about this as art. There's nothing about this that has any relevance or weight. This is just, I mean, you might as well have AI writing the scripts, right? At this point,
like this gross thing that between movies like Avatar and this film is just a substitute version of making an alien slash weird version of like
colonialism or something.
colonialism, or like Native Americans without wanting Native Americans to be on screen.
Yeah. The thing is, like, hey, why don't we make a movie about this thing that you're kind of fictionalizing as it actually happened to real human beings in history and show the details.
And for some fucking reason, this tribe has survived because they know how to live off the earth correctly. And so a bunch of white people are mad because they're doing it right.
I mean, yeah, that's what I would have done is it's indigenous people who kind of kept going.
Because like when you think about it,
and
like,
now the angry white people are back and
like,
no, you can't do this.
Tribe, they're like they find it, and like they find a nest. There's three of them, there's three eggs. And Noah's like, no. The promise is we leave one egg. That is what we do.
Because if you over harvest, then you drive it into extinction.
Yeah. And so it's supposed to be like this. They don't say it, but they kind of say it. They're living off the land. They're being grateful for what they're given, and they're trying to live in peace while they're like working coincide with these birds.
And like the only non-white people that appear on screen in this movie that aren't apes, or there are no non-white people, right? I think we maybe get like a tiny appearance of some at the very end of the movie. Yeah. But the two humans in this movie are white people.
Yeah.
And the way they're talking about these apes, you're like, yeah, this sounds weird. I feel very uncomfortable with the way you're talking about that.
Like, just, I feel like also just May is like that thing, but this is Planet of the Apes. What do we expect?
Well, now compare this to another recent apocalyptic film, Furiosa.
Yeah.
Both long movies, both a lot of world building. I would rather sit down and watch Furiosa from start to end again before I ever watch this movie.
Because there would be something to pick up on it. Like there'll be little things that you probably be like, oh, that was interesting, or I wonder how they did that.
The world is far more surprising in Furiosa, and the characters have far more engaging and interesting personalities.
There's also more to evaluate. Like how you were,
there's more commentary.
Like you said that somebody was explaining online that like when Furiosa like happens to lose her arm, which is not a fucking like spoiler, because like if you've
seen Fury Road, you know.
And the treatment that they're giving her, she mistakes it that they're like harming her, and the person was like, actually, that was a way that people like.
What was you're talking about when she gets taken to the like little cave house.
Yeah.
And what they're doing is they're harvesting maggots for food, and that's why they're using dead bodies. And that they were trying to assure her that they weren't going to hurt her. They were just going to let the maggots eat on the necrotized flesh.
Yeah.
Like that's I think the way people are reading that. But yeah, like that's a little bit of world building that you kind of have to think about.
Yeah, like she wakes up afraid. Of course, she's gonna run away. She doesn't know what's going on,
But
and the woman doesn't explain it very well. And
but
you're
then
like,
you have this movie where they'll just throw something into the world and it's just there for plot convenience. Like the only reason Trevathan, William H. Macy's character, exists is so that May has another human character to say things to so that the audience gets exposition.
yeah,
That's
because
it.
apparently he's just there to read to
Proximus.
which is weird. So you're saying in this world you can't teach them how to read? They can't learn how to read. They can learn how to speak.
Well, it's one of those where maybe over time they can learn to read,
Yeah.
but it's just I don't know much about chimp brain development in terms of language, so I can't really say, but I know in humans there's like a window, and that if you don't formally teach language and then teach reading, it becomes extremely hard, like for adults.
Yeah.
So that could be a thing, right? Once again, the film's you might be able to explore that in a TV series where you have more space to breathe, but in this, no. Would you recommend this movie to
No.
Yeah. I would say
It's just too long. It's too long. If you even if you cut an hour out of it, it would be too long.
Yeah, I would say if you don't see this movie, you will literally be missing nothing in your life.
Nope.
You will be the same as you were before. Following his acclaimed debut, Ham on Rye, Tyler Terramina's hypnotic follow-up is a midnight mosaic that reveals a suburban town steeped in alienation. It's the middle of the night, but things are far from quiet. As the camera peers into the late-night happenings of various residents, we witness a number of them quietly escape into the dark on rollerblades. Drawing on 1960s European art cinema and 1990s kids' TV in equal measure, Happer's Comet presents striking individual vignettes that unfurl like a collective dream. Mesmerizing and meditative, the film solidifies Taormina's gift for transforming everyday banality into uncanny cinema. So, Ariana, we'd previously seen Taormina's film Ham on Rye.
Yeah.
Group of middle school kids dressing up, going to some sort of party at a pizza place, and then they disappear. And then the second half of the film is sort of the people who remained dealing with this existential question of where they went, and no one ever really knows. What do you think of the work? And this Happer's Comet, you can watch it on Tubi. It is 62 minutes long, so it is a very easy film to digest.
I feel as if, and I don't think that he would take this in a wrong way, a lot of his scenes and pieces of cinema feel like a fever dream.
Yeah.
So when I think about Ham on Rye, I think of the isolation that one feels when you're a teenager and suddenly all your friends start to hook up with one another and start dating, and then you're last to know about everything.
Because like the one kid who stays behind is the one who didn't have like a date, I think. Yeah.
Or like the one girl that's left behind is because she didn't like anybody, or they kept pushing boys that she didn't like. And it's, even though like that had a storyline that you could follow through, there's
very
like
loose, very loose.
Yeah, because there's times that we would leave the storyline and then return to the storyline.
I feel like what Tyler Terramina does, and I think this is the 90s kids TV, he makes movies inspired by the Adventures of Pete and Pete for adults.
Yeah.
So it takes the sort of surreality of that Pete and Pete world and grounds it in sort of adult anxieties, is how I would describe it.
Yeah.
Now, this is a COVID movie in that he made this in the early part of 2020. He went back to Long Island, which is where he grew up, and shot this movie. And I want to read you a quote I found. He wrote a very lengthy review on Letterboxd.
Okay, about his own film?
Where he didn't give it a score or anything, but he just sort of shared, here's the background of the movie. And so I pulled this paragraph because I thought this really illuminates the film. This film is a portrait of my hometown, which I imagine is quite similar to much of atomized America. It captures the feeling of walking through upper middle class neighborhoods and feeling like an intruder just for being there on those streets without sidewalks. Also, if you're awake in the middle of the night and you're not working, or I suppose even if you are automatically alienated from the masses for better or for worse.
It makes sense because like everyone else is asleep, everyone is busy. It's like this weird thing of it being like, I don't know about how you were raised, but I remember like my mom would tell me like I was not allowed to call anyone after 8 or 9 p.m. because it was rude.
Or we wouldn't like answer the phone after a certain hour because it was
Yeah.
like it would only be if we were aware, like if it was in the middle of the night and it rang, my parents would probably answer it because it might be an emergency.
Mhm.
But like that after dinner to bedtime period,
Yeah, no
Yeah,
no talking on the phone. Um this sense of isolation, especially like the person that's like rollerblading in a driveway and goes to hide.
Mhm.
Like to me felt a sense of like they were trying to do something for themselves but were ashamed at the idea of being caught or
Well, they're
seen.
like an adult man.
Yeah.
And you think of an adult man in the middle of the night rollerblading,
Yeah.
there is like some gender shame associated with that, right? Like,
Yeah.
what, you're a man, that's like gay. And
Yeah.
then like, why are you doing it at night? Were you trying to hide kind of a thing?
Exactly. When you know very well during the day it would be considered bad, but during the night it seems worse. A lot of the pieces also felt like Adult Swim experimental stuff.
Yeah, I can see that.
Where you felt the isolation even though you were watching someone else being alone. Like the old woman in her house, like just moving about. Like
There a dog up late at night watching TV by himself.
yeah,
Like, I love that scene.
It's this weird thing. It's like you have this dread even though nothing bad really happens.
Well, like somebody said, this is cozy skinamarink, where
Yeah.
there's no threat, but it's just the vibe of the middle of the night, the glow of TV, and just kind of things feel very mysterious.
Feel mysterious, but also like somewhat unnatural, even though we've all been in those situations.
Well, I would say what's interesting is a lot of the director's family and friends are the cast,
Mhm.
and a lot of the homes are their actual houses. Because
Okay.
he had to use what he had available to them. There were only two members of the crew. Taormina, who's the director, he also worked as the grip, so holding the microphone, overhead mic, and then appears in the film, I think, as well. And then the cinematographer.
Okay.
That was it. And I'd say for such a small crew and such a low budget, it is a gorgeous looking movie.
It looks very good. It doesn't look anything like you would claim like a documentary style, which would you expect with a two crew member.
Mhm.
The lighting is very good. It's subtle. It respects the fact that we are talking about late evening into the dark kind of situations. I thought it was interesting that it was like upper middle class that he said, because some of the places did look more lower class.
Yeah.
But that's probably just my view of just being like,
I think
there's no class.
It also sort of showcases the diversity in landscapes that you can find in Long Island, which
Yeah.
we associate with New York City. But like there's a extended sequence with cornfields.
Mhm.
And so it shows you that, oh, this isn't just like a place where, New York people live. This is a community and an environment unto itself. The I saw people refer to it as lo-fi lynch.
Yeah, especially when his side scenes, when you get away from the main characters and you're half expecting for someone to say something weird like I don't know, cornmeal or something like this, whatever it is that was like on the last
Creighton corn.
yeah,
Okay.
just screaming it.
It's a film that highlights a lot of anxiety, depression, sleeplessness.
Mhm.
And I thought a way to sum it up, nostalgic bleakness. It's a film that feels both nostalgic and worried about that nostalgia.
Yeah.
And if you think about Long Island in the political context of America right now, it is a psychotically pro-Trump place. And we've seen file footage from back in the 70s of black kids riding their bikes through a Long Island neighborhood and a bunch of white kids calling them the N-word and telling them to get
Yeah.
out. That's Long Island. And that was 40, 50 years ago. So I think this alienation and this anxiety is a natural outgrowth of this very reactionary mindset in the community.
Yeah, especially when you think about how, like, when we were growing up, there was this whole thing of being like, your kid's gonna get kidnapped, or there's pedophiles on the
What was the
loose.
Satanic Panic, the
Yeah.
serial killers, just that every stranger danger, just say
Yeah,
no.
there was like
And all of this didn't actually help you become a more functional adult. It just instilled in you anxieties about modernity.
yeah, which is like this fucked up thing when you think about like going when we're talking about this nostalgia setting. I just remember being a kid and watching a lot of like Spanish news network programs or talk shows, and it was always just being like it was like there was always this danger about being a child,
Yeah.
right? Like you're gonna get abducted, or here's a story about like a 10-year-old that gave birth to a baby and blah blah blah, and you're just like,
Well,
what?
but none of it was ever directed at the culprits behind all of this, which would be
No.
typically men in authority. So
Yeah.
clergy, police, abusive, not all teachers, but there were, of course, you're always going to find people that use that, right? Or basically caretakers of children that we were trusting, and they were given all this authority and power only to then use that to their advantage and abuse these kids.
Yeah, like there's this weird evolution afterwards when you think about it, when it's no longer talking to the victims, where they talk to the victims, but they never really talk about like how it was that the victims became a victim. Or afterwards, like the victims are portrayed as like, if they're not perfect, then it's their fault.
Well, then also you have instances, I forget the name of the specific daycare, but there was one, I think, in Washington State where suddenly they were being accused of performing satanic rituals with the kids. And eventually it turned out that none of this happened. It was almost a case of mass hysteria in which somebody heard one thing and then somebody took that and their kid heard it and then was like, no, 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 that happened to me, because it's the way AI works, right? It's designed to please the person with the query. So if the police officer is asking you and you're 6, did they do this? And it seems like the
And
police,
they give you details when they're asking you the question.
and they keep asking you the same question over and over, you're going to go, oh, this is what he wants to hear, so I'm going to tell him that. And then it turns out, innocent people have been accused of these crimes. Well, on the flip side, the Catholic Church seems to have made an industry of like molesting and raping children with no tangible consequence for that institution whatsoever.
Which correlates to that feeling of dread when you're watching this film, to me, because it's just sort of, that's why all these people are isolated.
Or that's why they're doing things in private at night, is because they're afraid of how others will react to them. It reminded me a lot of the writing of Stephen Milhauser, who I don't think you've read. And he's a writer that I can see why somebody wouldn't like him, because he does write in this very kind of magic realist, surreal thing. And he wrote a book called Enchanted Night that all takes place in a single night. And it's just strange things occur where there's like mundane things with like teenagers, but then also like the god Pan from Greek mythology appears.
Okay.
Or like weird magical things happen. And the book just kind of floats around, returning to some characters and describing more of what they're doing, but there isn't really a plot. It's just a mood piece.
Yeah.
It's to get you in the place of this, because he's also writing, I think, from like the Eastern Seaboard. So like that kind of regional feel and atmosphere, which I think we get here a lot. I think it does a really interesting job of feeling familiar, but then also feeling strange and new, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, especially like if you're unfamiliar with the area, but there's so much that between the area, between the way the houses are set, between the lighting, between that feeling of being awake in the middle of the night when you shouldn't be, feels familiar, but then like the way the houses are set up feels different, or the trees, or like basically like the exteriors, they feel as if you should know this place, but you're like, but I can't identify that area, which is more close to home for him.
Yeah, I'd say it feels like we're in a dream that multiple people are having at the same time, which I think is where the Lynch angle comes from. And so these people are kind of very, very lightly crossing paths, to the point that some of them never even really know the other ones are there.
Yeah.
Would you recommend Happer's Comet to our audience?
Yeah, because again, with the European setting, it does remind me
European setting.
Well, not the Europeans, the influence.
Oh, okay.
I think about that film that we watched. It was a French film, and it felt like a puzzle where it was referencing Barbie. I forgot like Jackie, like it's supposed to be like you watch France from the airport, then you see
Jacques Tati's Playtime.
Yes.
Yeah.
I could see that relation.
This is kind of like a navel-gazing Tati.
Yes, where it's kind of like the low rendering, not as nice, but actually creepy in the dark kind of Tati.
It's something that looks simple on the surface, but there's a lot of complexity.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that I think if you rewatch it, you'll start to uncover more complexity than you did the first time.
Yeah, where you're not really following a storyline, but you're watching this all play out. And like you said, there is a connection. They just don't know it.
I would say I would recommend it as well for two reasons. It's 62 minutes and you can watch it for free on Tubi.
Yeah.
So there's really no loss there other than like an hour of your time. And when you compare it to something like Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, where I'm having to give up like 2.5 hours plus, I'd rather watch something like this that is short and packed with lots of interesting things than something that's sprawling but never really has anything to say.
Yeah.
Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode of the Pop Cult Podcast. Make sure to check our show notes for any important links that we've mentioned and to our website, popcult.blog. Make sure that you're subscribed to be notified wherever it is you listen so you'll know when new episodes are up. If you visit popcult.blog right now, you're going to find a lot more reviews. We just finished up a series looking at all of Jim Varney's Ernest movies. And then to finish out July, we're going to be doing a short 5-film series on 1980s fantasy film worlds. And that means next week you'll be seeing reviews for Dragon Slayer, Conan the Barbarian, and The Never-Ending Story showing up. If you enjoy what we do on the blog and here on the podcast, we would encourage you to support us financially on Patreon. There's different levels for you to pick from, and I want to thank our current patrons, Becca and Matt. They both donate at the $10 Writers Room level, which gets them the ability to pick a movie once a month. I will watch it, review it, and if you donate at that level, you can include your own thoughts in that review if you want as well. No matter what level you donate on our Patreon, you will get access to patron-exclusive podcasts. We have a new series that's coming soon, Love at First Laugh, which is where we look at 6 different romantic comedies from 1940 up to the 2010s. And I think it's a very interesting survey of the genre. Next week on our podcast, well, I don't know what we're going to be watching. There's a lot of movies that look ready to be coming out in August that I'm excited about, but not really access to anything that speaks to me right now. So I'll kind of look around at our watch list on Letterboxd. Maybe we'll do a what we've been reading, what we've been watching episode, but tune in next week's to find out what we're going to do. And until next time, you keep listening, we'll keep watching.